A merchant ship sank in a furious storm over 3,000 years ago. Its discovery would become one of the greatest archaeological stories of our time, rewriting history. The Uluburun shipwreck is more than a collection of ancient treasures. It is a perfectly preserved snapshot of a hidden world. By the end of this exploration, you will see the deep roots of our own globalized society reflected in this ancient catastrophe. Why did this single vessel carry the wealth of a dozen rival kingdoms? What can its eclectic cargo tell us about power and survival in a forgotten age? How does the fate of one crew change our understanding of an entire era? History is often presented as a series of isolated events, but what if the truth is a vast and interconnected web? The Aegean Sea holds its secrets close, in a deep blue silence broken only by the rhythmic breath of a diver. In the summer of 1982, a Turkish sponge diver named Mehmet Sakir was working near the rocky promontory of Uluburun when he saw something strange on the seafloor. He later described the objects to researchers with a simple, unforgettable phrase. He called them metal biscuits with ears. What he had glimpsed in the dim light were copper ingots, stacked and waiting in the sand for over 3 millennia. Their distinctive shape, with 2 protruding handles for carrying, looked to him like the ears of a loaf. That humble, almost playful description was the key that unlocked a royal tomb of the deep. This was not the find of a trained archaeologist, but a moment of pure serendipity, a chance encounter between a modern worker and an ancient catastrophe. Word of the discovery reached the Institute of Nautical Archaeology, and by 1984, an unprecedented underwater excavation began. The ship rested at a punishing depth, between 44 and 52 meters down, a zone where divers could work for only short periods each day to avoid the dangers of decompression sickness. The entire recovery would become a marathon, spanning 11 consecutive diving seasons, a testament to meticulous patience. As the team began to gently clear the sediment, the sheer scope of the cargo started to emerge, piece by bewildering piece. It was not a uniform load from one kingdom, but a chaotic collection of raw materials, finished goods, and personal items from across the known world. This diversity was the first major clue. An ordinary merchant vessel might carry wine or grain, but this ship was a floating treasury, and its improbable inventory immediately posed a profound question. What kind of mission required such a vast and varied assembly of wealth, and what hidden story did this sunken capsule preserve? The seabed was a mosaic of ancient industry, a scattered puzzle of a world long vanished. As the team meticulously mapped the site, the sheer variety of objects defied easy explanation. There were stacks of copper ingots, each one weighing roughly 25 kilograms, cast in the distinctive shape of a stretched oxhide with 4 corner handles. These were the currency of empires, the essential ingredient for bronze. Alongside them lay ingots of a shimmering, translucent material, glass in deep cobalt blue and vibrant lavender, a luxury as precious as gemstones in that era. Scattered among these raw treasures were the finished products of master artisans, delicate gold pendants from Canaan, a carved ivory cosmetics box in the shape of a duck, and pottery vessels from Cyprus, Canaan, and even the distant Mycenaean Greek world. This was no ordinary shipment. It was a curated collection of the Mediterranean's greatest hits. The cargo list reads like an ancient manifest of unimaginable wealth. The primary category was metal, with nearly 10 tons of copper and 1 ton of pure tin. The precise ratio needed to create 11 tons of bronze for weapons, tools, and ceremonial objects. Then came the luxury goods, ebony logs from Africa, whole elephant tusks of ivory, and tortoise shells destined to become ornate lyres. There were also organic stores, terebinth resin for perfume and incense, and pomegranates, their seeds miraculously preserved. Most telling, however, were the personal items: simple stone fishing weights, a set of bronze tools, and wooden writing tablets that had long since decayed, leaving only the ghostly impression of their hinges in the clay. This overwhelming diversity presented the first major historical puzzle. A simple merchant would specialize, carrying grain from one port to another, or perhaps a load of pottery. This vessel carried the foundational materials of power and prestige from a dozen different cultures. So what kind of mission required such an international assortment? The answer begins to emerge not in the ledger of a trader, but in the diplomatic correspondence of kings. This was not merely a trade ship, it was a floating embassy, its cargo a carefully balanced equation of gift and obligation, revealing a hidden web of alliances that held a fragile world together. To anchor this floating treasury in history, we need to know exactly when its journey ended. The ship did not carry a manifest with a date, so archaeologists became time detectives, using every clue the wreck offered. The first major clue came from the ship itself, from the very trees that gave it form. Specialists performed dendrochronology, which is the science of reading tree rings. Just as each year leaves a distinct mark in a growing tree, the pattern of wide and narrow rings creates a unique fingerprint of climate and time. By examining the wooden remnants of the hull, they could match the ring sequences to known historical chronologies. This analysis suggested the oaks and cedars used to build the vessel were felled around the year 1305 before the Common Era. But a ship could sail for years after its construction, so this was only a starting point. The next layer of evidence came from the cargo, specifically the beautiful painted pottery from the Mycenaean Greek world. Ceramic styles, like fashion, change over generations. The specific shapes and intricate designs on these jars and cups were hallmarks of the late 14th century before the Common Era. This stylistic dating aligned perfectly with the tree ring evidence, narrowing the window further. Yet the most personal and politically charged piece of evidence was found among the gold jewelry. It was a small, exquisitely crafted scarab seal, an amulet shaped like a beetle inscribed with hieroglyphs. The name it bore was that of Queen Nefertiti, the powerful and iconic wife of the Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten. Her period of influence is well documented, firmly placing this object, and by extension the ship carrying it, within the late 14th century. By cross-referencing these independent lines of evidence, the tree rings, the pottery fashions, and the royal seal, archaeologists reached a confident conclusion. The Uluburun ship met its fate around the year 1300 BC, give or take only a few years. This precision is transformative. It moves the wreck from being a timeless ancient mystery to a precisely dated historical event. We are no longer looking at a generic ancient ship, but a vessel sailing in a very specific decade, a snapshot frozen at a pivotal moment. This was the height of the Late Bronze Age, a period often called the First Great Age of Internationalism. The great kingdoms of Egypt, the Hittites in Anatolia, and the Mycenaeans in Greece were all engaged in a delicate, complex dance of diplomacy and trade. By pinpointing the year, we can now ask the right questions. What was the political landscape the ship left behind? And what urgent business might have compelled its crew to sail directly into the path of a storm that would preserve their mission for eternity? The very design of the ship held clues to its homeland. Archaeologists studied the construction method, a technique known as mortise and tenon joinery. This is where craftsmen would cut a rectangular slot, the mortise, into one plank and fashion a matching protrusion, the tenon, on another. They would then fit them together like a three-dimensional puzzle, locking the hull together with wooden pegs. This was a signature style of shipbuilders from the Levantine coast, the region encompassing modern-day Syria, Lebanon, and Israel. The personal belongings scattered across the site confirmed this origin. Simple stone weights used for weighing small quantities of precious goods, a type common in Canaanite markets, and cylinder seals used for stamping documents, all pointed to a crew from that coastal culture. So this was likely a Canaanite vessel built in a bustling port like Ugarit or Byblos, yet its cargo was overwhelmingly international. This presents a fascinating contradiction, a local ship carrying a global treasury. How do we resolve this? The answer lies in a special role that emerged in this complex era, that of the neutral carrier. This ship and its crew were likely not working for a single king or empire directly. Instead, they probably operated under the authority of a powerful mercantile family or a strategically independent city-state. A place like Ugarit was a master of this delicate balance, a wealthy port city that maintained friendly trade relations with everyone, the Hittites to the north, the Egyptians to the south, and the Mycenaeans across the sea. Its merchants were the trusted intermediaries, the go-betweens who could sail into rival ports without immediately raising suspicions of espionage or aggression. Think of them not as loyal subjects of one empire, but as the contracted diplomats of the age, the only ones who could reliably move sensitive goods across contested waters. Their vessel was a floating neutral zone, its hold a testament to carefully negotiated exchanges. So we begin to see the ship's true identity. It was a Levantine craft, yes, but its mission was transnational. It served as a critical linchpin in a vast and hidden alliance system, a single thread woven through the fabric of multiple kingdoms. Its home port was merely the starting point for a journey that was meant to bind empires together with gifts of metal, glass, and ivory. This understanding transforms the wreck from a collection of objects into a character in a political drama. Where was this neutral ship headed on its final, fateful voyage? The destination reveals the ultimate purpose of this delicate web of connections. The staggering heart of the cargo was a mountain of metal, 354 oxide ingots, nearly 10 tons of raw copper, formed the ship's foundational weight and its most politically charged commodity. To understand this, we must see copper not as a simple ore, but as the lifeblood of an age. Bronze, the alloy that gave the era its name, is made by combining copper with tin. This metal was the essential ingredient for everything that defined civilization and power, from the farmer's plowshare to the soldier's sword, from the ceremonial dagger to the elaborate fittings of a royal chariot. Control over copper was not merely an economic advantage, it was the cornerstone of military security and royal prestige. And in the late Bronze Age, one island kingdom held a near monopoly on this critical resource, ancient Cyprus, then known as Attaché. The sheer volume of Cypriot copper on the Uluburun ship, enough to outfit a small army, points directly to this island as a strategic superpower. Its mines were the engine of empires, and its rulers wielded incredible influence simply by controlling the flow of this reddish metal. The ship's connection to Cyprus is confirmed by more than just ingots. Among the cargo were distinctive pottery vessels, jugs and bowls with designs unique to the island, personal items that likely came aboard with the copper. This tells us the ship's journey included a deliberate, significant stop at a Cypriot port. It was not a casual trading call, but a calculated resupply at the very source. Think of Cyprus as the indispensable refinery in a global supply chain, a place where every major kingdom had to maintain friendly relations, regardless of their rivalries elsewhere. The Uluburun ship, loaded to the gunwales with Cypriot copper, was therefore carrying a cargo of immense strategic importance. Its voyage was part of a regulated, high-stakes exchange, a diplomatic circuit where this metal served as the ultimate gift, the binding token of alliance between distant courts. The survival of great kingdoms literally depended on the goodwill of Cypriot merchants and monarchs, and this single ship was a vital artery in that system. But copper alone could not make bronze. The recipe required another, even rarer metal, one whose origin was so mysterious it would become the ship's greatest enigma. Yet copper alone was useless, a soft metal waiting for its partner. To forge the hard, resilient alloy of bronze, ancient metallurgists needed to add tin, a metal so rare and geographically elusive it became the ultimate strategic commodity of the age. The Uluburun ship carried a full ton of it, a treasure arguably more valuable than all the gold on board. This tin presents us with a profound mystery, a detective story written in metal. While copper sources were well known and controlled, the origins of late Bronze Age tin have been one of archaeology's most stubborn puzzles. Where did this vital ingredient come from? Geological analysis of the ingots points not to a nearby source, but to distant, almost mythical lands. The unique chemical fingerprint of the metal suggests origins as far away as the mountains of Afghanistan, the distant reaches of Central Asia, or even the remote tin streams of Cornwall in southwestern Britain. Each of these locations lies thousands of kilometers from the Mediterranean shore. This single fact transforms our understanding of the Bronze Age world. It was not a collection of regional neighbors trading locally, but a planet-spanning network, a web of connections so vast it boggles the mind. Imagine a substance mine in the rugged highlands of Central Asia, transported by caravan across deserts and mountain passes, traded from hand to hand through countless intermediaries, and finally loaded onto a ship in a Levantine port, all to be blended with Cypriot copper for a king's ceremonial sword. This was a supply chain of breathtaking complexity and fragility. Every ingot of tin on the Uluburun ship is a silent witness to a cascade of agreements, a chain of trust and negotiation that stretched across cultures and languages. It implies not just trade, but diplomacy, protected routes, and standardized measures so merchants from different ends of the earth could do business. The presence of this tin tells us that the stability of great kingdoms, their ability to equip armies and craft symbols of authority, depended on the smooth functioning of a system that no single ruler could see or control in its entirety. It was a shared vulnerability, a hidden interdependence that made every major power a participant in a delicate, global balancing act. The ship's mission, then, was to navigate this precarious web, delivering the components of power. But who was waiting to receive this monumental gift, and what did they offer in return? But the ship's hold contained more than the foundational metals of empire. It carried the very essence of royal splendor, objects designed not for utility but for awe. Among the copper and tin were nearly 175 ingots of a material that seemed to capture light itself, glass in deep, mesmerizing shades of cobalt blue, vibrant lavender, and rich turquoise. In the 14th century before the Common Era, glass of this quality was not a common commodity. It was a high technology, a secret art mastered in the royal workshops of Mesopotamia or Egypt. Producing these large, pure ingots required immense skill and controlled, high-temperature furnaces, making them as precious as gemstones. They were the raw material for luxury, destined to be remelted and crafted into exquisite beads, vessels, and inlays for palace furnishings. Alongside this crystalline treasure lay another marker of supreme status, ivory. The ship carried whole elephant tusks, raw material ready for a court sculptor, as well as finished masterpieces like a delicate cosmetics box carved into the shape of a duck. And completing this trio of opulence were logs of ebony wood, a dense, jet-black timber imported from the tropical heart of Africa. To a modern eye, these might simply be expensive trade goods, but in the Bronze Age world, they operated under a completely different system. They were not bought and sold in a marketplace, they were gifted. This practice of formal gift exchange between kings is vividly documented in a remarkable archive of clay tablets known as the Amarna letters, diplomatic correspondence between the Egyptian pharaoh and his royal peers across the Near East. In these letters, rulers constantly refer to sending and receiving prestigious items, copper, glass, ivory, and ebony, along with chariots, horses, and fine textiles. The language is one of brotherhood and mutual generosity, but the subtext is pure geopolitics. A king would send a shipment of ebony logs and glass ingots to another, not as a commercial transaction, but as a tangible symbol of respect, a reaffirmation of their treaty, and a subtle demonstration of his own access to the farthest reaches of the known world. The gift created an obligation, a bond of reciprocity that helped maintain a fragile peace. So the presence of these specific luxury goods on the Uluburun ship is a powerful clue. It suggests this vessel was not just on a commercial run, it was engaged in high-stakes diplomacy, carrying the ceremonial glue that held alliances together. Its cargo was a carefully curated collection of royal gifts, making the ship itself a floating embassy. Its mission was to navigate between the courts of great powers like Egypt, the Hittite Empire known as Hatti, and perhaps Assyria, delivering tokens that whispered of friendship while carefully balancing the scales of power. This delicate dance of generosity was the hidden framework of international stability. But how do we move from interpreting objects to understanding the people whose lives depended on this fragile system? Among the ingots of statecraft and the gifts for kings, the seafloor also preserved whispers of the people who sailed this floating treasury. Scattered between the monumental cargo were humble, intimate objects, the personal effects of a living crew. These are not the treasures of pharaohs, but the possessions of individuals, and they tell a story just as compelling as any diplomatic treaty. There were simple stone fishing weights, the tools of a sailor hoping to supplement the ship's rations during a long voyage. A small stone mortar and pestle for grinding grain or spices spoke of daily meals prepared on deck. Simple oil lamps blackened from use would have cast a flickering light over evening tasks. And then there were the tools, a set of bronze chisels, drills, and saws, the essential kit for a ship's carpenter tasked with keeping the vessel seaworthy through storms and wear. Each of these items pulls the narrative down from the level of empires to the deck of a working ship, a vessel that was both a diplomatic courier and a home. One category of personal items, however, reveals a far more sophisticated reality. Archaeologists recovered a complete set of pan-balance weights, the ancient equivalent of a merchant's scales. But this was no simple set. The weights conformed to multiple different measurement standards used across the Mediterranean, including standards from Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Levant. This single tool kit is a profound clue. It means a merchant on this ship could conduct business in any major port, effortlessly translating values between the economic languages of different kingdoms. He was a financial diplomat, a human calculator facilitating exchange in a world without a universal currency. This person was not just carrying goods from point A to point B. He was actively engaging in trade, likely acquiring smaller, valuable items to supplement the main royal cargo or to trade for supplies along the way. The most poignant finds, however, hint at the presence of individuals who were more than sailors or merchants. A single, exquisitely crafted gold chalice was discovered, an object of such personal luxury and ceremonial significance it seems out of place among the ship's tools. Even more telling was the impression left in the sediment of a folding wooden writing tablet, its hinged panels long since rotted away. In an age where literacy was a rare skill reserved for scribes, diplomats, and high-ranking officials, the presence of such a tablet suggests someone on board was conducting official correspondence. This could have been a royal envoy, a diplomat carrying sealed messages between courts, or a senior merchant keeping records of the king's goods. These items transform our understanding of the passenger list. We are likely looking at a microcosm of the alliance network itself, a multi-ethnic crew of Canaanite sailors, a skilled carpenter, an adaptable merchant fluent in weights and measures, and perhaps a diplomatic attaché of elevated status, all journeying together. These personal effects achieve something remarkable. They bridge a gap of 3,300 years. When we look at a bronze drill, we can hear the sound of wood being repaired on a rolling sea. The fishing weight connects us to the hope of a fresh catch after weeks of dried rations. The merchant's weights, polished smooth from constant handling, speak of countless transactions and careful trust. These objects remind us that the vast geopolitical web of the Late Bronze Age was not an abstract system. It was operated, maintained, and ultimately depended on the daily labors, skills, and journeys of individuals. Their ship was a tiny, vulnerable node in that network, and their personal belongings are the fingerprints they left on history. This human dimension makes the final, catastrophic moment of the wreck not just a historical event, but a profound human story. What happened in those last, desperate hours as the storm overwhelmed them? And what can the very structure of the wreck tell us about their final struggle? The ship's connection to the Greek world was etched in clay. Among the Canaanite jars and Cypriot flasks, a significant portion of the pottery carried a distinct artistic signature, the elegant, painted designs of the Mycenaeans. These were not mere containers, they were cultural ambassadors from the warrior kingdoms of mainland Greece. The presence of these sturdy storage jars, delicate drinking cups, and ritual vessels tells a story far deeper than simple trade. It reveals that the Mycenaean palaces, famous for their hilltop fortresses and legendary heroes, were fully integrated into this Eastern Mediterranean system. They were not isolated warlords on the fringe of civilization, but active, savvy participants in a game of international diplomacy. The jars themselves likely held precious commodities, fine olive oil or resin-scented wine, products that would have been highly valued in the royal courts of Egypt or Anatolia. But the pottery's very style, with its spirals and stylized marine life, was also a powerful export. To own and use such vessels was to signal one's connection to a wider, sophisticated world, to partake in a shared culture of elite consumption that stretched from Thebes in Greece to Thebes in Egypt. This Mycenaean link proves the alliance web was astonishingly vast. The diplomatic and commercial circuits that connected the Hittites, Egyptians, and Cypriots did not stop at the Aegean Sea. They actively incorporated the rising powers of the West. A ship like the Uluburun was therefore a physical thread in this fabric, picking up goods and obligations from the Greek mainland before continuing its eastward journey. It carried with it the implicit guarantee of Mycenaean friendship, or at the very least, their vested interest in the network's stability. This transforms our map of the Late Bronze Age. It was not a binary relationship between East and West, but a multilateral, interconnected sphere where a Greek cup could toast an Egyptian pharaoh, and a Canaanite ship could be the trusted carrier for them all. The pottery is a quiet testament to a system where cultural exchange and political necessity sailed on the very same vessel. But one civilization's signature on this cargo was written in hieroglyphs of pure gold. The influence of New Kingdom Egypt is unmistakable, a dominant thread woven through the ship's eclectic inventory. While the star artifact is the tiny, exquisite scarab bearing Queen Nefertiti's name, her seal is just the pinnacle of a broader collection. The wreck also yielded other pieces of Egyptian-made jewelry, delicate pendants and beads alongside faience vessels, a brilliant blue glazed ceramic that was a specialty of Egyptian artisans. Even the luxurious ebony logs and elephant tusks, while sourced from farther south in Africa, almost certainly traveled north through networks controlled or heavily influenced by Egyptian trade outposts in Nubia. This pattern reveals Egypt not merely as a participant in this system, but as a gravitational center, a colossal consumer of prestige goods, and a diplomatic powerhouse whose favor every other kingdom sought. The scarab itself is a capsule of profound historical significance. Whether it was a formal diplomatic gift from the royal court, a high-value trade item, or a personal amulet carried by a well-connected passenger. Its presence directly anchors the ship to one of the most revolutionary decades in Egyptian history, the Amarna period. This was the era of Pharaoh Akhenaten and his queen, Nefertiti, a time when Egypt temporarily turned its religious and political focus inward, championing the worship of a single sun disk, the Aten. This internal revolution had massive external consequences. Traditional diplomatic relationships were strained, alliances were tested, and the flow of gifts and correspondence documented in the Amarna letters became a frantic effort to maintain stability amid the upheaval. For a ship to be carrying Nefertiti's personal seal during this volatile time is extraordinary. It means the vessel's operators, those Canaanite merchants from the coast, had somehow gained access to the innermost circles of Egyptian power during a moment of supreme tension. They were not outsiders, they were trusted intermediaries, perhaps some of the few reliable links Egypt had to the outside world while it was redefining itself. This connection reinforces a critical idea about the Uluburun voyage. It did not operate in the shadows, skirting the edges of empires. It sailed with the implicit sanction, or at the very least the clear recognition, of the great kingdoms. Its cargo was so valuable, so politically sensitive, that its safe passage would have required assurances from multiple royal courts. A shipment of this magnitude could not move through contested waters without some understanding, some royal safe conduct, whether spoken or written. The Egyptian objects, especially the scarab, are like diplomatic passports stamped in gold and faience. They signal that this mission was part of the official business of the age, a cog in the machinery of international relations that kept the peace. Egypt's role was dual, both as the final destination for much of this splendor and as the ultimate guarantor, through its immense cultural and military prestige, that such a vulnerable treasury could even attempt its journey. The scarab is more than a beautiful artifact. It is a key that unlocks the ship's legitimacy, proving it moved within a fragile framework of royal consent. But if this system of gifts and alliances was so robust, so carefully managed by kings and merchants, what could possibly threaten it? The answer may lie not in the cargo, but in the very structure of the ship and in the silent story of its final, catastrophic descent into the deep. We have a ship loaded with the gifts of kings, but to hear the actual voices of those kings, we must turn from the seabed to the desert. In the late 19th century, archaeologists made a discovery in Egypt that would become the perfect companion to the Uluburun wreck, a library of international diplomacy inscribed on clay. They uncovered hundreds of tablets in the ruins of Akhetaten, the city built by the pharaoh Akhenaten, now known as Amarna. These are the Amarna letters, and they are nothing less than the diplomatic email of the late Bronze Age, a frozen moment of international chatter. Written in a diplomatic language called Akkadian, using the wedge-shaped script of cuneiform, these tablets preserve the official correspondence between the Egyptian court and the other great rulers of the time. They name a club of superpowers, the so-called Great Kings, who considered each other peers. This elite circle included Egypt, the Hittite Empire known as Hatti, the kingdoms of Babylon and Assyria in Mesopotamia, the once powerful Mitanni in northern Syria, and the copper-rich island of Attaché, which we know as Cyprus. In their letters, these monarchs address each other with a telling term of endearment, brother. It is a word heavy with political meaning, signaling formal equality and mutual obligation. The letters reveal a constant, often fretful, negotiation. Kings reaffirm treaties, propose marriages between royal families, and make elaborate requests. One ruler might ask another for a shipment of pure gold, in exchange for which he promises chariots, horses, or lapis lazuli. They complain bitterly if the gifts they receive are subpar, or if a trading caravan is delayed. They gossip and protest about the behavior of minor city-state rulers, the very local authorities who likely facilitated ships like the Uluburun. The correspondence is at once grand and strikingly petty, a mix of high statecraft and very human irritation. And the gifts they discuss, the items constantly moving between courts to cement these brotherly bonds, are precisely the materials that filled the Uluburun's hold. The letters mention shipments of copper from Attaché, ebony and ivory from the south, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and fine gold work from Egyptian workshops. They speak of glass not yet as a common object, but as a prestigious raw material for royal artisans. Reading these texts, you are given a detailed shopping list for maintaining a superpower alliance. Then you look at the inventory from the sunken ship, and the connection is electrifying. The Uluburun wreck is not just a random collection of valuables, it is a physical, three-dimensional manifestation of the Amarna letters. The 10 tons of Cypriot copper mentioned in the correspondence are there, stacked in oxhide ingots. The ebony logs and elephant tusks requested by kings are there, lashed to the deck. The cobalt blue glass ingots, a technology so prized it was a state secret, are there, resting in the sand. The ship provides the stunning archaeological proof that this textual system was not just lofty words on clay, but a real, functioning network of exchange. It was a system that required trust, neutral carriers, and ships brave enough to sail across open water with the literal foundation of kingdoms in their belly. The letters give us the why, the political framework, and the wreck gives us the how, the logistical reality. Together, they form a complete picture, allowing us to see not just the alliance, but the very vessel that was its lifeline. This system of brother kings and floating treasuries points to a remarkable historical reality, a kind of ancient world order. Historians often refer to this as the Great Powers Club, an informal but deeply consequential alliance of the major kingdoms of the late Bronze Age. Think of it less as a formal treaty organization and more as an unspoken gentleman's agreement among the superpowers of the day: Egypt, the Hittite Empire, the kingdoms of Mesopotamia, and the indispensable island of Cyprus. Their primary goal was not conquest but stability, a delicate balance of power that prevented any one kingdom from becoming overwhelmingly dominant and plunging the entire region into a devastating, all-out war. They maintained this balance through 3 key mechanisms. First was mutual recognition, the explicit acknowledgement that each ruler was a great king, a peer and a brother, entitled to respect and direct communication. This is why the Amarna letters are so formal and flattering. Even when the writers are annoyed, the language of equality had to be preserved. Second were the marriage alliances, where royal daughters were sent to become queens in foreign courts, literally weaving the ruling families together with bonds of blood and politics. And third, most critically for our ship, was the principle of regulated trade and safe passage. Merchants operating under the sanction of these great powers were granted a form of extraterritoriality, meaning they could travel through rival territories with a degree of protection. Their caravans and ships were not to be plundered, their persons were not to be harmed because they carried the goods and the goodwill of a fellow great king. This is the invisible shield that likely protected the Uluburun vessel on its long journey. Its eclectic cargo was not a random assortment, it was a collection of diplomatic credentials. The Cypriot copper proved it had the backing of Attaché. The Egyptian scarab and glass hinted at favor from Pharaoh's court. The Mycenaean pottery signaled connections to the warrior lords of Greece. To attack this ship would be to insult multiple members of the club simultaneously, a reckless act that could shatter the fragile peace. So the vessel sailed as a node in this sanctioned network, its very richness a testament to the system's success. For a time, this intricate web of obligation and etiquette worked. It allowed tin from Afghanistan to reach workshops in Greece and ebony from Africa to grace palaces in Anatolia. It created a level of economic and cultural interdependence that had never been seen before, making these ancient states far more connected than we once imagined. The Uluburun's mission was possible only because of this grand, unspoken pact among kings. Its heavy laden hold is proof that the system functioned, that trust could span vast distances, and that cooperation, however fragile, was the engine of a golden age. But the very existence of such a delicate system raises a haunting question. What happens when the trust begins to fray, when the threads of this intricate web start to snap one by one? The identity of the ship's commander remains one of its most compelling mysteries. We know the crew, but who held the ultimate authority for this floating treasury? The sheer political weight of the cargo suggests this was no ordinary captain. Most scholars now believe the voyage was directed by a figure we might call a merchant diplomat, a unique hybrid of trader, envoy, and trusted confidant. This individual would have possessed a rare combination of skills, fluency in multiple languages, a deep understanding of royal etiquette across cultures, and the commercial acumen to assess the value of everything from a ton of tin to a golden scarab. He was not just sailing from port to port, he was moving from court to court, navigating protocols as treacherous as any reef. His mission was state-sponsored, likely commissioned by a king or a powerful city-state ruler who needed a neutral, credible agent to manage affairs with rival powers. The merchant diplomat carried the authority of his patron, but also enjoyed the protective mantle of the Great Powers Club, allowing him to transit through contested waters where a military ship would spark immediate conflict. Think of his journey as a carefully orchestrated circuit, a grand tour of alliance maintenance. His ship may have started in a Levantine port like Ugarit, taking on Cypriot copper and perhaps Mycenaean pottery. From there, he might sail to the coast of Anatolia, to a Hittite-controlled harbor, to deliver a portion of the copper as part of a standing treaty obligation. In return, he would take on other goods, maybe silver or fine textiles, and more importantly, sealed clay tablets containing messages for the next king on his route. His next stop could have been a major Egyptian port in the Nile Delta, where he would present the golden scarab and the exquisite glass ingots as formal gifts from his patron to the pharaoh's court. There, he would receive Egyptian luxury items, ebony, ivory, and gold, destined for another royal client elsewhere. He was less a simple transporter and more a circulatory system for the body politic of the age, delivering the oxygen of gifts and information that kept the whole network alive. Personal items like the balance weights and the writing tablet fit this profile perfectly. He needed to conduct smaller trades to provision his ship and perhaps acquire unique items requested by his royal contacts. The writing tablet was essential for keeping official records and potentially drafting preliminary reports or messages. This reframes the tragedy of the shipwreck in a profound way. The sinking was not merely a commercial disaster, it was a diplomatic catastrophe. Imagine the ripple effect. A king in Anatolia would wait in vain for his promised shipment of copper and glass, interpreting the delay not as an accident, but as a deliberate snub or a sign of weakness. The Egyptian court might wonder why their formal gifts never arrived, suspecting treachery or interception by a rival. Alliances hinged on the reliable flow of these tangible tokens of goodwill. A single broken link, a sunken ship, could generate waves of mistrust and recalculation across the entire system. The loss of the merchant diplomat himself was perhaps the greatest blow, for such individuals were irreplaceable assets. Their knowledge, their relationships, their hard-earned trust with multiple royal courts, all of that sank with the copper ingots. This perspective makes the Uluburun wreck a stark monument to the fragility of that ancient world order. It shows us that the stability of empires could depend on the safe passage of one ship and the skill of one individual sailing into a storm off a rocky coast. We can trace the ship's final voyage like detectives reconstructing a lost journey. By mapping the origins of its cargo, a probable route emerges, one that reveals the careful choreography of Bronze Age statecraft. The voyage almost certainly began in a bustling Canaanite port, a place like Ugarit, where the ship took on its core crew and perhaps those initial stores of resin, oils, and the merchant's versatile set of balance weights. This was home base, the starting point of a mission sanctioned by local rulers who thrived on their neutrality. The first major logistical stop, however, was not a mystery. The staggering 10-ton mountain of copper points unequivocally to Cyprus. The ship would have sailed a relatively short leg north to the island, docking at a major harbor like Inkomi or Kishon. Here, under the watchful eyes of Cypriot officials, the vessel's character transformed. Its hold was filled with the foundational wealth of the age, the oxhide ingots loaded with ropes and sweat, turning the ship into a floating strategic reserve. This was not a quick stop for a few trade items. This was the primary purpose of the early leg, loading the single most important diplomatic commodity in the Mediterranean. With its hull now heavy with copper, the captain faced a navigational choice. The most direct route to the great courts of the East, like the Hittite capital or Egyptian delta ports, would be to sail east from Cyprus, skirting the coast of Syria. But the cargo tells a different story. The significant collection of fine Mycenaean pottery suggests the ship next turned its prow westward into the open Aegean Sea. This was a deliberate detour, adding weeks and considerable risk to the journey. Why take such a path? The answer is written in clay and paint. To acquire those elegant Greek jars and cups, the ship likely called at a major Mycenaean port, perhaps on the mainland like Pylos or on a key island like Rhodes. This stop served multiple purposes. It allowed the merchant diplomat to pick up prestigious Aegean goods, which were highly valued in Eastern courts, and more importantly, it enabled him to collect any diplomatic messages or tokens from Mycenaean wanaks or kings, destined for their brother rulers abroad. This westward loop wove the Greek world directly into the fabric of this single diplomatic mission. Now laden with both Eastern copper and Western pottery, the ship would begin the long, cautious journey eastward toward its ultimate destinations. Its path would not have been a straight shot across open, dangerous water. Instead, it almost certainly hugged the southern coastline of Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, moving from bay to protected bay. This was not merely prudent seamanship, it was geopolitical necessity. This coastline was dotted with harbors controlled by vassal states of the Hittite Empire or by independent but friendly trading cities. Sailing this coastal ribbon meant the ship could stop for fresh water, make minor trades, and most crucially, remain within a corridor of relative safety sanctioned by the Great Powers Club. Attacking a vessel in these waters would be an act against local authorities who were themselves bound by treaty to the Hittite overlord, a breach of the fragile peace. Each safe harbor reached was a testament to the functioning alliance, a place where a ship bearing the Scarab of Nefertiti and the seals of other kings could expect shelter, not hostility. The route itself, therefore, was a physical manifestation of the political web. It was a circuit of trust, mapped not by stars alone but by treaties and royal friendships. The merchant diplomat at the helm needed more than nautical charts. He required an intricate mental map of political conditions, knowing which local ruler was currently in favor, which port was safe after a recent dispute, and where he could deliver a portion of his sensitive cargo to a subordinate official on behalf of a distant king. This knowledge was the true treasure of his profession, accumulated over a lifetime of voyages. His ship did not sail through neutral space. It navigated a landscape of alliances, where every headland and harbor was connected to a wider system of obligation. This makes the final moments of the voyage all the more poignant. Somewhere along this familiar, allied coast, perhaps making a final turn toward the Egyptian delta, the weather turned. The very geography that offered protection with its rocky promontories like Uluburun could become a trap in a sudden, violent storm. The ship, for all its political connections, was utterly alone against the sea. The sea does not distinguish between a king's ambassador and a common sailor. As the Uluburun ship fought its way along the Anatolian coast, the greatest threat to its mission was not political betrayal, but the weather. The precise cause of the sinking remains a quiet mystery, but the geography of the wreck site offers powerful clues. The vessel came to rest on a steep, rocky slope near the headland of Uluburun, a place whose very name means Great Cape in Turkish. This was not a gentle, sandy shore where a ship might run aground and be repaired, but a jagged underwater cliff face. Such a location strongly suggests a catastrophic navigational error during a storm, a sudden loss of bearing in blinding rain and towering waves that drove the ship onto the rocks before the crew could react. For ancient mariners, this was a tragically common fate, a reminder that all their political connections and royal safe conducts were meaningless against a furious gale. Archaeologists carefully examined the wreck for signs of what happened in those final moments. They found no evidence of fire, which would suggest a battle or an accident with an onboard lamp. They found no weapons embedded in the timbers, no clear signs of violent conflict among the scattered cargo. The distribution of the artifacts, while scattered by centuries of currents, suggests a rapid sinking rather than a methodical stripping of valuables. This points overwhelmingly to a natural disaster, a storm that overwhelmed even this experienced crew. We can picture the scene, the ship heavy with 10 tons of metal, riding low in the water, becoming unmanageable as waves crashed over the deck. The sailors would have fought to steer clear of the dark shape of the cape, but wind and current conspired against them. A sickening crunch of timber on rock, the immediate rush of water into the hold, and within minutes, a vessel carrying the wealth of empires was pulled into the deep, its political mission erased by the sea's indifference. Yet, we must also acknowledge the shadow that haunted every merchant voyage of this era, the threat of piracy. In later decades, texts would speak ominously of the sea peoples, marauding groups who disrupted trade and contributed to the era's eventual collapse. Could pirates have been responsible? It is possible but unlikely in this specific case. A successful pirate attack typically ends with looting, the valuable cargo carefully removed and repurposed. The Uluburun's hold, however, was found still packed with its incredible wealth, from the copper ingots to the golden scarab. Pirates would not have left such treasures behind. The storm theory, while less dramatic than a tale of maritime raiders, is ultimately more profound in its implications. It reinforces the human drama at the heart of this story. This was a skilled crew, led by a merchant diplomat with a mental map of royal alliances, yet they were utterly at the mercy of the natural world. Their knowledge of Hittite treaties could not calm the wind. Their Egyptian scarab could not ward off the waves. This vulnerability makes their story universal, connecting us across millennia to the fundamental peril of any long journey. In a cruel twist, their catastrophic loss became archaeology's extraordinary gain. The very storm that doomed them sealed the ship in a deep, cold time capsule, freezing a single moment of international exchange. The violent event that ended their lives preserved their mission for eternity, allowing us to reconstruct not just a shipwreck, but an entire world system in breathtaking detail. Their tragedy grants us a clarity that no contemporary text or ruined palace ever could, a complete and untouched snapshot of how a globalized age actually functioned, from the royal gifts down to the sailors' fishing weight. This sudden, preserving catastrophe forces us to ask a larger question, one that hangs over the entire Late Bronze Age. If the system was so interconnected, so finely tuned, what could possibly cause such a magnificent web of alliances to completely unravel just a century after this ship sank? The storm that sealed the ship in a deep freeze also presented a profound modern dilemma. Bringing these artifacts to the surface was only the beginning of their journey. Objects that had rested in a cold, dark, and stable environment for over 3,000 years were suddenly exposed to light, air, and the relentless pull of gravity. Without immediate and expert intervention, the entire archive would have crumbled into dust within days, a second and final loss. The real rescue mission began not on the seafloor, but in the conservation laboratories of the Bodrum Museum of Underwater Archaeology. Here, a different kind of hero took over, the conservators, whose patient, unseen work is the only reason we can see these treasures today. Their challenge was to outwit time itself, to stabilize materials that had been waterlogged for millennia. For organic treasures like the ship's timbers, the ebony logs, and the delicate ivory cosmetics box, this meant a years-long, delicate process. Water had replaced the original cellular structure of the wood and ivory, so simply letting them dry would cause instant, catastrophic shrinking and cracking. Instead, conservators used a method akin to a medical transfusion. The artifacts were slowly immersed in tanks filled with a waxy substance called polyethylene glycol, or PEG. Over months and years, this compound gradually displaced the water molecules inside the cells, providing a new, stable internal support structure. Only after this painstaking treatment could the objects be slowly dried and finally revealed in their true form. It is a race against decay measured not in days but in decades, a silent testament to perseverance. The metals presented a different but equally informative puzzle. The great copper ingots, for instance, were encased in thick, green corrosion crusts. An untrained eye might see this as damage to be cleaned away, but to a conservator, this crust is a historical document in itself. It contains microscopic traces of the materials the ingots were stored with, hints of the ship's environment, and even the chemical signature of the ancient seawater. By carefully studying these layers under microscopes and with X-rays, scientists can learn about conditions on the seafloor and the composition of the original metal. The conservator's role is to stabilize this crust, to preserve the information it holds, not merely to make the ingot look shiny and new. This behind-the-scenes work transforms artifacts from fragile relics into durable sources of data. Every brushstroke, every chemical bath, every careful measurement is an act of translation, converting a physical object from a state of vulnerability into a permanent resource for study. Because of this heroic, meticulous effort, a researcher can now hold a Mycenaean pot, an Egyptian scarab, or a Canaanite balance weight without fear of it disintegrating. They can analyze, photograph, and display these objects, allowing the cargo to speak across centuries. The conservators are the guardians of the archive, the essential bridge between the dramatic recovery from the deep and the quiet, ongoing revelation of history in the laboratory. Their success means that the story of the Uluburun and the hidden web of alliances it represents is not a static tale from the past, but a living narrative that continues to yield new secrets with each passing year of study. The most recognizable objects from the wreck are not golden jewels, but those heavy, oddly shaped metal slabs. The so-called oxhide ingot, with its 4 distinct handles, is the universal symbol of Bronze Age wealth. But why would metalworkers go to the trouble of casting hundreds of ingots into this specific, stretched hide shape? The answer is a blend of brilliant practicality and deep symbolism. On a purely functional level, the design is ergonomic genius. The 4 protruding handles, one at each corner, allowed 2 men to easily carry the 25-kilogram slab using simple poles. This made loading and unloading a ship like the Uluburun a manageable, if back-breaking, task. More importantly, the handles provided secure anchor points for ropes, so the ingots could be lashed tightly together in the ship's hold, preventing them from shifting during a storm and capsizing the vessel. This shape was a safety feature born from hard experience on the open sea, yet the form meant far more than simple utility. Casting metal into this consistent, complex shape required a controlled, high-temperature process and a standardized mold. This was not something a small village smelter could produce. The oxhide shape was almost certainly a guarantee, a stamp of approval from a central authority, likely the royal administration of Cyprus that controlled the copper mines. By producing ingots of identical shape and weight, they were creating a trusted, recognizable unit of value. Think of it as the ancient world's version of a mint stamp on a gold coin. Any merchant or king from Greece to Mesopotamia would see an oxhide ingot and know exactly what they were getting, a specific quantity of pure, high-quality copper. This eliminated the need for constant weighing and assaying, speeding up transactions and building trust across vast distances. The archaeological record proves this point spectacularly. Oxhide ingots or fragments of them have been found in royal tombs in Egypt, in hoards on the island of Sardinia, in sunken ships off the Turkish coast, and in palace storerooms in the Levant. Their distribution maps the very alliance network the Uluburun ship navigated. They were an internationally recognized form of bullion, a protocurrency that facilitated trade between people who spoke different languages and worshipped different gods. The Uluburun's cargo of hundreds of these ingots, therefore, represents something astonishingly modern. It is evidence of a sophisticated, interconnected economic zone operating on agreed-upon standards. The ingots were more than raw material. They were the physical embodiment of a shared system of value, a silent language of commerce that allowed the alliance to function. Their distinctive shape, born from practicality, became a powerful symbol of a connected world, a guarantee written not in words but in copper and tin that bound kingdoms together in mutual dependence. Buried among the tons of copper and chests of glass was a small, unassuming treasure. A single bead of amber, warm and golden, rested quietly on the seabed. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed a simple trinket, a sailor's personal charm. But when scientists analyzed its chemical signature, they uncovered a geographical shock. This amber did not come from the Mediterranean world. It originated in the dense, ancient pine forests of the Baltic region, in what is now Scandinavia or the coasts of Poland. That tiny bead had traveled over 1,600 miles to reach this doomed ship, a distance that rewrites our map of the Bronze Age. Its journey is a story in miniature, a testament to a connectivity far more vast than we ever imagined. How did a piece of resin from a northern forest end up in the cargo hold of 11 ships sailing the Aegean? The answer lies not in direct voyages, but in an immense, interlocking chain of hand-to-hand exchange. This was not a single merchant traveling from the Baltic to the Mediterranean. Instead, the bead moved through a relay race of countless intermediaries. It likely passed from hunter-gatherer communities in the north to the emerging chiefdoms of Central Europe, then southward through the river valleys and mountain passes of the Balkans. At each step, it was traded, gifted, or bartered, its value increasing with every mile it traveled away from its source. By the time it reached the sophisticated markets of the eastern Mediterranean, it had been transformed from local material into an exotic luxury, a rare symbol of the distant and unknown. Its presence on the Uluburun ship is a quiet revolution. It proves that the Great Alliance network of Egypt, Hittite, and Mycenae was not an isolated club. It was the glittering, powerful core of a system whose filaments reached thousands of miles into what we once considered the peripheral wilderness. The Baltic region, far from being a disconnected backwater, was linked, however indirectly, to the fate of pharaohs and emperors. The amber bead is a physical echo of those connections, a whisper from the northern woods that found its way onto the roster of royal gifts. This changes everything. It means the late Bronze Age globalized system was not merely a Mediterranean phenomenon. It was a sprawling web that drew in resources and people from across the European continent, integrating disparate worlds into a single, complex economy of prestige. That one bead, resting beside Cypriot copper and Egyptian gold, encapsulates a staggering truth. The ancient world was far more interconnected and far smaller in a social sense than we ever dared to believe. But if the web was this extensive, this resilient, what force could possibly be powerful enough to tear it all apart? Just 60 years before the Uluburun discovery, and only a few dozen miles away along the same treacherous Turkish coast, divers found another ancient shipwreck. This site, known as Cape Geladonia, was a landmark discovery in its own right, proving that Bronze Age seafaring was real and could be studied underwater. Yet when you place its cargo next to that of the Uluburun, the difference is not one of degree but of kind. The Geladonia ship was smaller, carrying about 1 ton of metal, mostly broken or scrap bronze tools and ingots, along with the simple weights and tools of a single metalsmith. It appears to have been the working vessel of an independent scrap merchant, a small businessman of the sea recycling metal along the coastal towns. This was the gritty, everyday reality of maritime trade, vital to local economies but operating on a completely different plane. The Uluburun ship, by contrast, was a colossus. Its cargo was not scrap but pristine, standardized ingots fresh from the royal furnaces of Cyprus. It carried not the tools of one artisan, but the raw materials to supply the workshops of an entire kingdom. The sheer scale is staggering: 10 tons of copper versus 1, a ton of tin versus none, and a breathtaking collection of luxury raw materials absent from the smaller wreck. This comparison draws a clear line in the sand, or rather in the seabed. Cape Geladonia shows us the local peddler moving his goods from village to village. Uluburun shows us the international envoy moving the very foundations of state power from palace to palace. One wreck speaks of local barter, the other of high-stakes diplomacy. The Uluburun's uniqueness cements its status. It is not merely a trade ship, it is a floating archive of state-level economics, a direct material link to the correspondence of kings we read in the Amarna letters. No other archaeological discovery, on land or sea, captures the operational reality of the Great Powers Club with such clarity and completeness. This single vessel, lost in a storm, gives us a privileged, unparalleled view into the machinery of a world that thought it had built a lasting peace. So what was the true purpose of this incredible cargo? Scholars have long debated whether to label it as tribute, trade, or gift. Each term carries a different meaning, a different vision of how this ancient world operated. Tribute implies a political hierarchy where a weaker state sends goods to a stronger one as a sign of submission and to secure protection. The sheer volume of material on the Uluburun could suggest this, a massive payment from a vassal to an overlord. Yet the cargo's origins are too diverse, coming from multiple kingdoms that were not all subject to a single ruler. It lacks the uniformity of a simple tax payment. The second model is pure commercial trade, where merchants sought profit by moving goods from areas of plenty to areas of scarcity. The standardized ingots and the merchant's balance weight strongly support this idea. There was clearly a vibrant market for copper, tin, and luxury goods, and someone was making a living by facilitating these exchanges. But then we have the third model, the one so vividly illustrated by the Amarna letters, the system of formal gift exchange between royal brothers. The exquisite glass, the ivory, the golden scarab, these are not bulk commodities. They are tokens of prestige, carefully chosen to convey respect and reinforce personal bonds between distant courts. The most compelling answer is not to choose one, but to embrace all three simultaneously. The Uluburun ship is a perfect snapshot of a hybrid economic reality, a world where state diplomacy, royal monopoly, and private enterprise were completely intertwined. Think of it as a layered mission. At its core, the 10 tons of copper and 1 ton of tin represent a state-sponsored bulk commodity transfer. This was the essential fuel for the economies and militaries of the great kingdoms, a transaction of strategic necessity that followed established trade routes and fixed prices. It was business, but business conducted under the watchful eyes of kings. Layered on top of this were the luxury raw materials, the cobalt glass and the ebony logs. These fit the gift exchange model perfectly, tangible symbols in the diplomatic dance, meant to oil the wheels of alliance and create mutual obligation. They were the physical complements exchanged in the letters between pharaohs and emperors, and finally, woven throughout, we see evidence of private commercial activity. The merchant's multi-standard balance weights allowed him to engage in small-scale trading at every port, perhaps acquiring the pomegranates, the extra pottery, or the amber bead through local barter. His personal toolkit suggests he was ready to repair, adapt, and negotiate on his own behalf, supplementing the official mission with profitable sidelines. This blurring of lines is not a confusion, but a defining feature of the late Bronze Age alliance network. In this world, politics and economics were inseparable. A king's wealth was measured in his access to foreign goods, and a merchant's safety was guaranteed by his connections to royal patrons. The Uluburun ship sailed in this ambiguous space, its hold a physical manifestation of a complex system where a gift could also be an investment, where trade reinforced peace, and where a private businessman served as a crucial cog in the machinery of state. This hybrid system created remarkable stability, but it also created profound vulnerability. The entire structure depended on a constant, reliable flow of goods and goodwill. If that flow was interrupted, the delicate balance would shatter, turning economic partners into desperate rivals. This realization brings us to the final, haunting chapter of the Bronze Age story, a century of unraveling that would see this magnificent web of connections torn apart. The storm that claimed the Uluburun was a profound human and economic tragedy, but it was not a geopolitical catastrophe. For the Great Alliance network, the loss was a manageable disruption, a single broken thread in a vast and resilient tapestry. The ship sank, but the system did not. The carefully woven web of royal brothers, gift exchange, and neutral merchants proved robust enough to absorb the shock. While the specific individuals and their precious cargo were lost forever, the underlying structures of diplomacy and trade remained firmly in place. New merchant diplomats would have been appointed, new ships built and loaded, and new voyages launched to fulfill the same essential circuits of obligation. The network was designed with redundancy, featuring multiple ports, alternative overland routes, and a shared understanding that the flow of goods must continue, regardless of individual misfortune. For nearly another century after the Uluburun settled into the silty darkness, this international order persisted, facilitating exchanges from the Baltic to the Nile. This longevity is precisely what makes the wreck so uniquely valuable to us today. It is not a relic of a dying world, but a perfectly preserved snapshot of that world at its absolute peak. The Uluburun captures the late Bronze Age system in its prime, a moment of astonishing connectivity and complexity, a golden hour before the twilight. Its cargo represents the highest expression of a globalized experiment that had taken centuries to build. Yet, within that very success lay the seeds of profound vulnerability. The system's incredible interdependence, which allowed for such wealth and cultural exchange, also made it susceptible to a cascade of failures. A century later, around the year 1200 before the Common Era, this magnificent edifice would begin to crumble. A combination of severe climate change leading to drought and famine, large-scale movements of displaced populations, often called the Sea Peoples, and internal rebellions and administrative collapse within the great kingdoms themselves would converge in a perfect storm. The carefully maintained alliances, the royal letters, the trusted merchant routes, all of it would fracture under the strain. the world that the Uluburun ship so confidently navigated would vanish into a historical dark age. So the ship's legacy is dual. It shows us the breathtaking height of what was achieved, a level of international cooperation and economic integration that would not be seen again for millennia. Simultaneously, its very existence is a poignant reminder of that achievement's fragility. The wreck is a time capsule from the last great era of stability, a silent witness to the calm before the storm that would ultimately redefine the ancient world. The Uluburun ship sailed a world that feels startlingly familiar. It moved through a landscape of international trade, diplomatic treaties, and shared cultural tastes, a system that bound distant kingdoms into a single, interdependent community. In many ways, we are looking at a prehistoric version of our own globalized age. The copper and tin ingots were the semiconductors of their time, the essential, high-technology components that powered every advanced society. Just as today's nations rely on complex supply chains for microchips or energy, the great powers of the late Bronze Age depended on the steady flow of metal from Cyprus and tin from mysterious, distant lands. Their entire system of security and prestige was built upon a network of trust and logistics that spanned continents. The Uluburun itself was a kind of ancient container ship, but also a diplomatic pouch carrying both the bulk materials of statecraft and the intimate tokens of royal friendship. Its voyage demonstrates that the challenges we associate with modern globalization are not new at all. Ancient societies grappled with supply chain security, the need for neutral intermediaries, and the delicate balance between competition and cooperation. They developed a sophisticated framework, the Great Powers Club, to manage these tensions, creating a stable order that lasted for centuries. This historical parallel invites a profound reflection. That ancient world achieved a remarkable level of integration, fostering an exchange of goods, ideas, and art across vast distances. Yet, as we know, that interconnected civilization eventually faced a collapse. A convergence of climate shifts, population movements, and internal failures caused the web to unravel. This is not a direct prediction, but a poignant reminder of a fundamental truth. Interdependence creates both tremendous resilience and profound vulnerability. The stability of the network becomes its greatest point of risk. The story of the Uluburun and its world offers us more than just a glimpse into the past. It provides a deep context for understanding our own era. By studying how they managed their alliances, secured their resources, and navigated their conflicts, we gain a longer perspective on the perennial challenges of a connected world. Their experience suggests that the success of any global system hinges not just on economic or military power, but on the strength of the relationships, the trust, and the shared rules that bind it together. Their collapse whispers a cautionary tale about what happens when those bonds of mutual obligation finally break. As we look at our own intricate web of global connections, the silent cargo of that sunken ship urges us to consider what we are building, what we depend on, and how we might fortify the fragile threads that hold our shared world in balance. The seabed has given up its treasures, but the conversation with the past is far from over. The story of the Uluburun is not a closed book, but a living dialogue, one that grows richer with every technological leap we make. Modern archaeology is no longer just about recovering objects. It is about interrogating them with tools our predecessors could scarcely dream of. Today, scientists perform lead isotope analysis on those iconic copper ingots, tracing the unique chemical signature of the metal back to its specific mine on Cyprus, mapping ancient extraction with pinpoint precision. Inside the very same Mycenaean pots that once held oil or wine, researchers now conduct organic residue analysis, detecting invisible traces of ancient contents that reveal the ship's provisions and the commodities that fueled its economy. These are not just new answers, they are entirely new questions asked of artifacts that have been in museums for decades. The the core mysteries persist, fueling scholarly debate. The exact origin of that vital ton of tin remains an open case, with arguments pointing to Central Asia, Afghanistan, or even farther frontiers. The identity of the ship's ultimate owner, whether a specific king, a powerful merchant family, or a consortium of interests, is still pieced together from circumstantial evidence. And the ship's precise diplomatic purpose, the exact royal courts it was meant to connect on that final voyage, is a puzzle assembled from cargo lists and historical probabilities. This ongoing investigation proves a vital point. Archaeology is a dynamic science, not a static collection of facts. Each technological advance, from advanced scanning to genetic studies, acts like a new lens placed over an old photograph, suddenly revealing details that were always there but unseen. The Uluburun wreck, therefore, is more than a site. It is a generative engine for research. It inspires chemists to study ancient metallurgy, naval architects to reconstruct its sewn hull design, and network theorists to model the social bonds of the late Bronze Age. Every new paper, every fresh analysis subtly adjusts our picture of that interconnected world. This means our understanding is always provisional, always evolving. The quest to fully comprehend this single ship, lost in a single storm, continues to refine our portrait of an entire era, reminding us that history is not a destination, but a journey of endless discovery. The story of the Uluburun ship is not confined to the pages of a history book. It lives in glass display cases under soft museum lights. If you wish to stand in the presence of this ancient voyage, to see the gleam of the gold chalice or the weathered green of a copper ingot, you must travel to the southwestern coast of Turkey. There, within the formidable stone walls of a Crusader castle overlooking the very sea the ship once sailed, you will find the Bodrum Museum of Underwater Archaeology. This is not just a museum, it is a perfect fusion of setting and story. The castle itself, built by the Knights of St. John in the 15th century, speaks of a later era of Mediterranean power struggles, making it a profound home for artifacts from an even earlier age of alliance and conflict. Inside its cool, vaulted halls, the Uluburun collection is displayed with the care and reverence it deserves. You can walk from case to case and follow the entire narrative, from the humble stone fishing weights to the staggering stacks of oxhide ingots. The museum's presentation allows you to appreciate the scale, to understand how these objects related to one another in the ship's hold, and to witness the stunning artistry of the ivory duck cosmetic box or the delicate gold pendants. This is where the archaeological report becomes a physical encounter. You can observe the precise craftsmanship of the merchant's balance weights, or study the hieroglyphs on Nefertiti's scarab, realizing you are looking at an object that was handled in a royal court over 3,300 years ago. The experience is transformative, making the abstract concept of a Bronze Age alliance network suddenly, powerfully real. While the Bodrum Museum holds the definitive collection, pieces from the wreck occasionally travel the world as part of special international exhibitions, serving as ambassadors for this incredible discovery. Other artifacts remain in research institutions where scientists continue their quiet work of analysis. For any enthusiast drawn into this story, a visit to Bodrum is a pilgrimage. It is a chance to complete the circle, to move from learning about a hidden web of alliances to standing inches away from its tangible proof. To see the cargo is to understand the mission, to feel the weight of history not as an idea, but as a physical presence resting silently behind glass, waiting to tell its story to anyone who will listen. Among the ingots and artifacts, the sea preserved two silent witnesses. During the meticulous excavation, archaeologists uncovered the partial skeletal remains of at least two individuals. These were not placed with ceremony, but lay where they fell, caught in the final chaos of the sinking. After 3,300 years, they are the most poignant connection we have to the people who lived this story. They move the narrative from a grand geopolitical web to the deck of a ship in a storm, reminding us that history's vast systems were operated by hands, guided by eyes, and lived by hearts. These individuals were far from anonymous. One was a young adult, the other older, their bones holding stories of a life at sea, of meals shared under the stars, and of the specialized knowledge that made them invaluable. They were the human nodes in the network, the sailors who knew how to read the wind and secure a cargo of shifting metal, the merchant who could calculate value in 3 different weight standards, perhaps even the envoy who carried the trust of kings in his memory. They had names now lost to us. They had families who waited for a return that never came, communities that felt their absence. Their journey was one of professional mastery, navigating not just the physical capes and currents of the Mediterranean, but the even more complex waters of international etiquette and high-stakes exchange. To reduce them to a footnote in a cargo list is to miss the essential human truth of the Uluburun. Every oxhide ingot was loaded by their labor. Every delicate glass ingot was secured by their care. The entire mission, this intricate dance of empires, depended utterly on their skill and courage. Honoring their story requires a moment of quiet reflection amidst the scientific triumph. It asks us to see beyond the treasure to the tragedy, to recognize that this unparalleled time capsule was sealed by a profound human loss. This layer of empathy does not diminish the historical importance, it deepens it. It ensures we understand the Uluburun not merely as a collection of objects, but as a shared human experience, a voyage of ambition and connection that ended in a single, catastrophic moment off a rocky coast. Their final resting place, now an archaeological site, is also a memorial. It reminds us that the grand narratives of alliance and collapse, of bronze and gold, were ultimately built on the lives of ordinary people executing extraordinary journeys, people whose stories deserve to be remembered as much as the kings they served. The Uluburun's legacy extends far beyond its own story. Its true gift to history is a new way of seeing. This single shipwreck became a masterclass in interpretation, teaching archaeologists to read a scattered cargo not as a list of objects, but as a living document of political and economic relationships. Before its discovery, a pile of copper ingots was just that, a pile of metal. After Uluburun, that same pile tells a story. Its standardized shape speaks of a central authority. Its chemical signature points to a specific island under royal control. Its sheer volume signals a state-level transaction, not a local barter. The wreck demonstrated with breathtaking clarity that the artifacts themselves are nodes in a hidden network. By meticulously mapping what was found with what and tracing each item to its origin, researchers could reverse engineer the entire system that brought them together. This methodology, pioneered in the deep waters off Turkey, has become a template for understanding ancient connectivity everywhere. It has shifted the fundamental question archaeologists ask at a site. No longer is it simply, "What is this?" Now the question is, "What connections does this represent?" This approach transforms a lone merchant's grave on the Silk Road from a collection of silks and coins into a map of caravan routes and oasis city alliances. It turns a sunken how in the Indian Ocean from a hold full of ceramics into a chart of monsoon winds and port city rivalries. In each case, the principle is the same. You start with the assemblage, the unique combination of goods from disparate places found in one location. You then work backwards, asking why these specific items from these specific cultures ended up together at this specific moment. The answer always reveals a web, a system of exchange, diplomacy, or migration that bound distant people together. The Uluburun proved that a single point of catastrophic loss, a shipwreck, a buried hoard, or even a ceremonial deposit, can illuminate the vast, invisible circuits of an age. It taught us that globalization is not a modern invention, but a recurring human pattern. and that its blueprint is often hidden in the quiet conversation between artifacts resting side by side in the earth or in the silent depths of the sea. The Uluburun's cargo was a conversation in copper, glass, and gold. It was a dialogue between kings, conducted not with words alone, but with the very substance of their power and prestige. This sunken vessel, therefore, is not merely an archaeological site. It is a profound historical document, one that has fundamentally rewritten our understanding of an entire era. For generations, the Late Bronze Age was often pictured as a series of isolated, mighty fortresses, each kingdom ruling its own domain with only occasional, often hostile, contact with its neighbors. The Uluburun shipwreck shattered that simplistic view. It revealed a Mediterranean world humming with connection, a sophisticated and interdependent web of alliances that functioned with remarkable complexity. This was a world sustained by the rhythm of diplomatic letters etched on clay, by the calculated generosity of royal gifts, and by the shrewd navigation of merchant diplomats who understood the subtle language of this shared system. Every artifact, from the mountainous stacks of Cypriot copper to the enigmatic tin from distant, uncharted mountains, tells a single, unified story, the story of connection. This hidden web, so vividly preserved for us by a single catastrophic storm, offers a stunning revelation. It shows us the deep, ancient roots of what we call globalization. It reveals an enduring human drive, a persistent need to reach beyond the horizon, to build networks of exchange and understanding across vast seas and disparate cultures. The merchants of Ugarit and the sailors on this ship were participants in a grand, early experiment in international community. Their world, with its delicate balance of gift and obligation, mirrors our own interconnected challenges in surprising ways. As we navigate the complexities of our globalized age, with its own fragile supply chains and diplomatic tensions, the lessons from this ancient ship resonate across the millennia. They remind us of the incredible strength that comes from mutual dependence, from the shared rules and trust that allow civilizations to flourish. Yet, they also whisper a cautionary tale about the profound fragility woven into those very ties. The story of the Uluburun is ultimately a human story, a testament to our timeless ambition to build bridges across the unknown. If this journey into a world revealed by a shipwreck has captivated you, there are always more mysteries waiting in the depths of history. Consider subscribing to continue exploring the forgotten webs that shaped our past, and we would love to hear your thoughts. What parallels do you see between this Bronze Age network and our world today? Share your reflections in the comments below.